Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our School Business Administrator Roundtable. Kathy's going to go ahead and introduce our panelists on the call today.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. My team, we polled different people to try to get topics, and we thought that this was a good topic. As you know, NJDOE hasn't been forthcoming with a lot of information, so we perceive this as getting prepared for GASB 84. And Heidi and Mon are going to talk a little bit more about the very little bit more that we know at the end of the presentation. But I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Cheryl Leidig from Wayne Township Schools. She's the Assistant School Business Administrator, and her past has been as an auditor, so she comes with that background. And we have Robin Tedesco, who we have known her entire career, and she has served in the Parsippany School District for much of her career and has worked at the other end of the scale in Mount Arthur. So she represents both ends of the spectrum. And we have Alicia Valverde Mesa. She used to work with Nisivoccia and recently went to join the team of Morris Hill School District. So you're coming here with a whole lot of audit people. I'd also like to introduce our partners. We have with us Heidi Wohlleb, Valerie Dolan, and Mon Lee, and they've all been instrumental in putting this program together. So without further ado, I would like to go into the discussion. You do know that in the past 5 years, at least, that the Department of Education has been sticky about things like board policies and procedures with student activity funds for years. We go through economic ups and downs, and during those downturns, students always want to raise funds. So there had been, over the past years, questions about what students are able to do. And I think I pretty much surmise that if you have a school organization and the kids want to raise funds, they can do that. But you have to keep it within the reins, and you have to make sure that the board is authorizing those type of activities. So we're reminding you that there should be board policy that encompasses all. Talk about donations. Lately, we've had virtual events. We constantly get questions about whether they can establish GoFundMe accounts. I'm not sure if our panelists are going to talk about GoFundMe, but I know in our discussions leading up to this presentation, pretty much surmised that that is not a good option. So I think what I'd like to do is invite Cheryl to talk about board policies and procedures as they relate to Wayne. And then we'll go to Robin and Alicia to comment on the same.
Good morning. I want to thank Kathy for asking me to be a panelist today. I'm very excited to be here. Wayne actually has 3 separate board policies in regards to student activities. We have a pupil fundraising policy, which kind of outlines what is approved, what's not approved, and the process in order to establish fundraisers. We also have a generic student activity funds policy, which details what we consider activities that are allowed. And we also have a policy regarding monies in school buildings. Overall, we tend to not collect as much cash because we have other procedures in place. So we don't have monies in the schools as much, but we do have a policy regarding that. And we also have an overall student activity advisor handbook policy, which details our whole student activity process, from fundraisers to collections to disbursements and what's allowed, what's not allowed.
Robin, would you like to comment?
In my recent district, which is Mount Arlington, pretty much the student activities has been just collecting at the school level. I know they want to kind of put more policies in place to tighten up that and to make sure that, you know, we can follow a good audit trail. So we're going to be pretty much bringing that to tightened up policy.
And Alicia?
Morning, everyone. In Morris Hills, we currently are collecting at the school level. Each school has a treasurer and they are in charge of bringing the funds over to the board office. However, we are trying to implement collecting all funds electronically online, and that will bring us to the next topic.
Okay, so we will take questions as we go, and Valerie will be controlling them to let us know that there are questions out there, but if you have any, please let us know. So collections and deposits of funds. As the auditors, we have talked to school business officials and they've said, you know, the money comes into the board office, it's deposited within 48 hours, it goes through those tightened measures, but our concern is always the collection at the school level. And so that's why in this 21st century that we talk about, you know, how we can eliminate actual cash being collected at the schools, teachers and advisors collecting for a trip or some other event, and the money, you know, the dates on the checks from the parents could be a month before they're actually deposited. So with that, Cheryl and Alicia and Robin have some experience with some of the measures that they've taken to minimize that. So again, I'll go in the same cycle. I'll ask Cheryl to comment and then we'll just continue through.
So in Wayne, we primarily use Community Pass as a means to collect all of our fees. So all of our programs that we have, whether it's student activities or it's our before and after care or our preschool, we collect all those funds through Community Pass to limit the amount of cash that's actually received at the schools. They still will occasionally do outside little fundraisers if you had a bake sale or something like that. But as far as field trips, class dues, all of that is set up as a program in Community Pass. So everyone that wants to pay for those, you know, the field trip will create an account in Community Pass and pay that way, so that there is no cash being held at the schools. And we also have a trail, so we know which parents for which students paid for which field trips. It helps if we need to refund. It helps with the way that we record the information, because we run various reports from Community Pass on a weekly basis, so we can record the activity in our computer software, because we have centralized the student activity information in the board office. So the schools do not have their own accounts. Everything runs through the board office, primarily Community Pass. If they do collect money at the schools for some reason, they complete a student activity deposit form, and they bring that form to the board office to make the deposit. They're also with Community Pass, since not everyone either is familiar with it or, I don't know, might not be comfortable paying through a credit card. If someone wants to pay outside of Community Pass, they must come to the board office to pay, and we'll make the exception where we'll take a check, and there's a separate form for that to detail that as well. So we try to limit as much as possible being at the schools.
That's perfect. So Cheryl's been with Wayne for less than a year, and I don't know if you can comment on how difficult it is to implement Community Pass. Now again, in your situation, it's controlled at the board office and you have staff in the board office who can manage that. Would it be something that a smaller district, say Robin over in Mount Arlington, could utilize? Again, she's a one school, so the board office is in the school. So Robin has said that there's a closeness just because of space. I'd like to hear.
Yeah, so we do have an individual that monitors our Community Pass accounts. It is fairly easy once it's initially set up. What happens is if a club is doing a fundraiser, they have to get it approved and then let us know, and then that individual will go in and create that activity within Community Pass. And once you get it set up, it's fairly user-friendly on our end to be able to track everything. And the parents are great because everyone knows that that's a program that we use throughout the district, and they're fairly familiar with it. And if they do have any questions, they contact the Community Pass person that we have.
Okay, one last question from me is, are there costs associated with the parents paying through Community Pass?
So there are costs associated with it. We absorb the cost, so we pay for the transaction fees. Depends on the activity, how much you're using it. I know, you know, for example, based on our activity in February, it was about $600. But we're also doing other programs aside from student activities too.
Okay, and you have quite a number of schools, so are all of them participating in Community Pass? So when you look at it from that point of view, $600 in a year is not a significant amount of money.
Right, yeah, all of our schools, if they're doing these bigger activities, will be doing it through Community Pass. We have 15 schools, 2 high schools. The high schools are kind of the heavy hitters. They tend to do more.
Okay. I see we're getting some questions, but I think we'll...
I was just going to say, we have one question. I do want to ask it out. Well, when you set up your Community Pass, Cheryl, is it set up for each school, or is it one Community Pass is the question we're getting, or is it like an individual account for each of them? How does the Community Pass work?
So it's one, we have one program. So on our end, it's student activities. So each school falls underneath that, whatever the program is. So if someone goes to sign up, they will see, for example, we were doing a dance program. So it would be like SDA Wayne Valley, and they can pick which program they want to pay for.
So
and
it's
they'll
like
be
a
able
pull
to pick,
down.
there's like drop downs.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So Robin, you want to comment on any mechanisms that you've used in Parsippany or Mount Arlington?
Hi, everyone. So in Parsippany, we did have Community Pass. I put it in last year. I retired in September, so when we were implementing it, everything seemed to be going well. But we used it for our preschool and our after-school programs. I didn't start using it for student activities. I do think it's a great idea. I have spoken to the people in Parsippany, and they are going to be implementing some kind of program like Community Pass. I do not believe it's the same program as Community Pass for the student activities. And that will definitely help to tighten up. We had 10 elementary schools and 4 middle and high schools, and a lot of the monies, you know, were collected within the schools. So that would totally help with all of the regulations and making sure that the money gets to where it's supposed to go. As far as Mount Arlington is concerned, there are two schools there. The board office sits within one of the schools, and you know, it's easy for us to control the Decker school because that's where the board office is. The Mount Arlington school, they collect the money there and they bring it right down to us. It's a much more close-knit community there than in Parsippany, so it's easier to watch the funds. Would we go to a Community Pass? We use a collection service for the lunch program. Would they eventually go to do that? I think it's a great idea, and I'm going to put in suggestions to do that. So that's pretty much my comment on it.
Cheryl, we have a follow-up quick question on the Community Pass. Do all of your student activity funds go into one bank account, or do they go into separate bank accounts by the schools, or is there one internal student activity bank account?
They go into one bank account.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I want to give Alicia a moment, but again, with all our audience, all our clients, we're always there to help. And the idea here is to bring forth ideas and see if they would be workable in your district. But all 3 of our presenters who work in school districts, they all have the funds within the board office, except Robin, depending on what hat Robin's wearing. So I just want to reiterate that and just let you open up your mind to what people have to say, and maybe it could be a good solution going forward at some point. Alicia, could you talk a little bit about what you're doing in Morris Hills?
Sure. So right now, like I said, we are collecting at the school level, but we are in the middle of implementing NCR, which is a software that the goal is to integrate it with Aspen. So what happens is when parents go log in into their student's account for attendance, there will be an additional tab where they're going to see fees related to the student. If they're buying shirts, anything related to student activities will be available through there. So right now we are in the implementation process, signing contracts, trying to get NCR connecting with Aspen so they can start the integration progress. But the goal is that no cash will be collected at the school level and everything will be online. Even if we need to process refunds, it will be online. When the parent logs in, they will see any fees that they owe there. They will click on it. It will bring them into another browser and they just have to process their payment. We should be at the board office, the company will be sending us the money on a daily basis, deposited into the single student activity fund account. And then we are going to be able to run reports and post it by each revenue account, depending to which activity is related to. For the fees, we are building the fees within the product, so we're not paying for it. And the parents won't see that either. So that's the option what we're targeting for.
Okay, that brings us to our first polling question, Katie.
Great, we're gonna go ahead and launch a poll for everyone. Okay, everyone should be able to see it. All right, I see them coming in. Leave it open for a couple more seconds. Give everyone a chance to vote. So the question is, does your district utilize any online collection service for student activities funds? All right. Mostly everyone has voted. And everyone should be able to see the results. So most people are not using it. About 63% said no and 37% said yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Again, you know, as auditors, we get these questions and we have over 80 school districts and we have 7 partners leading the charge. So we're constantly in communication. It's hard to keep track. So it's nice to have this consensus, this consolidation of data. And I'm sure that we can absolutely assist the other districts who aren't utilizing it, because where they have centralized activities in the board office, there could possibly be a way that individuals at the school could manage something like this. We'll see if we can move toward that somewhere in the future. But I think it would definitely alleviate some of the anguish over student activity funds for you. I do have a question before we move off this topic. Val, you want to?
It's just that they're looking to make sure that we will be able to at some point provide them with contact information for those who are currently using a service, are looking for some information so that they could possibly look into it and bring it into their district.
Absolutely.
So, absolutely, we will provide that. We will get track of it all and then get it out to you.
Our panelists. Okay, so we talk about collection and deposit. Oftentimes, we can tell in many of our school districts that someone, a school secretary or another person is placed in charge of the funds. They're collecting, you know, somebody is collecting the money, bringing it to the school secretary, who is then bringing it over to the board office. So there is a period of time lag there in that. And then I don't know if we discussed being able to deposit money quickly, more directly, rather than, for years I've been hearing that the business office will send couriers to the school, and that's great. But I know there's also the possibility to scan bank deposits rather than running to the bank. So we will always hear, oh, you know, we don't go to the bank on Friday. And I will say Friday is probably the most important day to take money to the bank, because that means that, and we know that typically the collections are not cash, they're checks, but still collections shouldn't be sitting over a weekend for days. Things could happen. So we'll lead into cash disbursements. Again, our three presenters pretty much handle those through the business office, and they go through the purchasing cycle in the business office, which we know does not happen in many, many cases. So again, when you're making payments out at the schools, you're having somebody who's in charge, and we've had something got screwed up here. I apologize. I have deposit information there. But we've seen where there are requisitions or some curtailed form that is used in the student activity funds for payments. It's not a full voucher, but it's a piece of paper that someone has to sign off on. Whoever's receiving those goods has to give authority. You have the principal who gives authority, and then you have the cash disbursements. I do believe that over the past several years, we've pressed that there's not just one person signing those checks. So Cheryl, you want to take it off with cash disbursements?
Sure. So whenever the individual schools, clubs want to make a disbursement using student activity funds, in addition to going through the normal process that we use CSI as our software, they also will fill out a student activity purchase requisition form, which will have the approval of the principal or the advisor. That will be given to the school secretary, who will then take that information and enter the requisition, and then forward that form with whatever backup they have up to the business office, so that that can all be kept with the purchase order once it's generated. And then the checks will follow our regular purchasing process. They go on the bills list, they have the 3 signatures, they get the normal approvals. We don't do separate check runs for student activities. It's just part of our normal payment process.
So again, in that vein, Cheryl, then everything's approved by the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Student activities are, so over our careers, which mine has been decades, is that it is not required. A lot of things are not required, but we always say some things are good business practices. So we've always been a proponent that if it's not adverse to you, that it's a good idea to have the board approving those payments, because they do have indirect responsibility for those funds. The other thing that came to my mind was, you know, in small schools where they're collecting on their own and paying on their own, we have a big issue with having invoices for everything. And we know that they're making different kinds of purchases, and sometimes that's difficult to get. So do you have a problem with that? And do you have a problem with the urgency of I need this now, or your staff just know what the policy is and you're not going to get a check in 15 seconds? It just doesn't work that way.
Right. Most of them know the policy, and we don't have that issue. I mean, occasionally it'll come up and we'll take it on a case-by-case basis. But most of them run through the regular process, and it's good for us because we get to see what is being purchased before it's purchased. I mean, I remember being an auditor, you'd see some purchases and it was like, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that with student activity funds. Now we have the ability to kind of see what they're trying to do and make the determination if that should be student activity funds or if that should really be coming out of the regular operating budget. Gives us the ability to stop it if it's not an appropriate student activity expense.
Okay. Robin, would you like to make some comments with regard to payments from student activities?
Sure. In Parsippany, the middle schools and the high schools all run through, we had Systems 3000 there, So all of the requests come through, I would approve them personally, and then we would process it on our regular bills list when we paid it. So that was very, very, it was very tight, and we really didn't have a problem. In the elementary schools in Parsippany, they each had their own checkbook. So what I did there was I developed pretty much a deposit sheet that they all had to fill out. The person who gave them the money, and when they received it, they both had to sign off on the deposit. And then when they made an actual purchase, I gave them voucher forms, and they had to fill out the voucher form. They had to have the invoice attached, and I would audit it. I would call the checkbooks in periodically and make sure that they were following all of the rules that we would follow as if they were going through the actual purchase order process within Systems 3000. In Mount Arlington, pretty much the process is pretty tight. I have an excellent assistant who makes sure that the purchases are going through the system. They go through CDK, and that the invoices are coming in and they're paid through the bill list. So both school districts have very tight procedures when it comes to the payments and getting deposits in.
You have any emergency purchases that come up?
Always, especially in Parsippany, because there's so many schools and so many people that are requesting funds. There's always an emergency, and they would have to email me and state their emergency. And sometimes I have to call them and say, that's really not an emergency, or you should have planned better. I did have a payable type of procedure manual, and in there it outlined the emergency procedures and what's considered an emergency and what's not. And if worst came to worst, I went to the principal and I said, we can't be doing this. So I tried to tighten it up that way, and that did help. But those are pretty much, that happens in every school district, I think, the emergencies.
Yep. Just nice to talk about how each of you manages those. And Alicia?
Yes, we use Alio in Morris Hills, and we have student activities in Alio, so that's an easy way for us. The staff, the secretaries, they enter the requisitions in the system, and then it goes by each level, whoever has to approve, supervisors, principals, purchasing, and then at the end, the business office. So we see everything that they are trying to purchase or pay, so there is no problem in Morris Hills.
So Alicia, in Morris Hills, you have 2 high schools. So going back to Rita's original question, do you have one student activity account and you have it broken down into Morris Hills and Morris Knolls?
Yes. So we have Morris Hills and Morris Knolls. We have 2 different treasurers, 2 different school accounts.
Okay. I don't see any questions there. Next slide. Okay. So we did talk about all of those.
Kathy, we do have a question.
Sure.
It wants to, the question is for Fund 20 revenue and expenditure lines are set up by school. I'm not sure if you mean Fund 20, or I'm not quite sure. Kelly, if you can give us a follow up with a question for me, that would be great. I'll get back to you, Kathy.
Yes. I do believe that Cheryl and Alicia and Robin, when you are managing student activity funds through the business office, that you have a separate fund for that. Do you all put them in like a fund? And I hate to use numbers because I don't keep up with the numbers. Fund activity, is it Fund 90 or, some fund code?
Fund 90.
95.
Okay. Because if Kelly's question relates to GASB 84 and Fund 20, we're going to be talking about that a little bit. Okay, could we have the next slide? So we get to the bank cash reconciliation, and I think that I'm just going to let them talk because they have more to say than I do. Cheryl, go ahead.
So the student activity accounts are just part of our regular monthly reconciliation. It is on our board secretary's report, and it's on our treasurer's report. So we just include those each month.
Yeah. Okay, Robert.
The same with Parsippany. We have a student activity secretary that handles the monthly transactions, and it's reconciled monthly, and it is reported back to the business administrator or the assistant business administrator. In Mount Arlington, I do it monthly for them, and I make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, I've only been there since January, and there really hasn't been any current transactions because of COVID, but hopefully that will start up again soon. And it is part of the treasurer's report.
And also, our business administrator, she's the one in charge of reconciling. The treasurer has, makes the deposits, gives out all the detailed information to the business administrator, and she's the person in charge because, like I said, everything goes through Alio, our accounting system, so it's easier.
Okay, so I do believe that the three people that we have presenting with us today are on the very high end of involvement, and you do not need to be that level of involvement. In hearing them and how composed they are and how worry-free they are about things is because they have gone the distance. We do recognize that in those situations, they have large office staffs, so we get it. Can't do that in every single school district. But again, some of the things that they're offering might make your lives a little bit easier. And people will say, GASB 84, was this all a plan? Was this all planned by the state of New Jersey? And no, it wasn't. DOE and GASB are two totally different organizations, and it's just leading up to. Over the years, they've always described student activities funds as the board having indirect responsibility. And they just keep bringing to light year after year how important it is that the student activity funds are under control. I do firmly believe that if you have certain things in place, it will alleviate some of the headaches that you feel. I will also offer the comment, and Heidi and Lon and Val can comment on that too. I haven't gotten as many questions on student activity funds as I have in the past. Situational things where I would receive a phone call and say the kids are going on a trip. Maybe that's because COVID happened last year. And we want to be able to tip the bus driver. And there are all these things that you just can't even anticipate. And trying to work through what the appropriate procedure would be in that place. So anybody else have any things that you've been asked lately in terms of extraneous things that happen in student activity funds?
For me, the questions were more at the end of last year about refunds of money for events that didn't happen, but I really haven't gotten any questions this year so far.
Okay. Mon and Val, good? Okay, so then this might just, record keeping and bank reconciliation are two different things. They go hand in hand. So you may have cash reconciliations being performed off the software, some done in the software. So if you're using Quicken or any of those softwares, you're going to get a different result. So again, in the situation with our speakers, that pretty much things are controlled in the business office, and so they have good controls in place, but please talk about the software that you utilize and how it prepares you to be able to have a balance by club and activity. We find that in some elementary schools where it's really nebulous or vague in terms of what the balance in the account is attributable to. But certainly at the middle school and high school levels, the funds are broken into each club and activity.
Kathy, we have
Sure.
a follow-up question on someone who missed a comment. What
Okay.
is the answer? I guess we discussed tipping a bus driver, and they were looking for the answer on, I guess, can you tip the bus driver?
I think we resolved in that case, and look at Robin smiling. I wonder, I thought in the case that I remember is that they were able to do it. That somehow somebody could be reimbursed for it. Heidi, correct me if I'm wrong.
I'm not sure. I think maybe the answer was they wanted to try to add it to the bill from the company, but I don't recall exactly.
We were trying to get it into the streamline, so I recall that too, is trying to add it and let the company tip the driver. But one way or another, we do get these questions. It's situational, and it's like, you know what, in this case, go ahead and do it, but let's learn from this and see how we can predict it in the future and prevent it in the future. Robin, you're smiling so much, I think you might have something to say.
I had an experience in Mount Arlington when I was the BA there about 4 or 5 years ago, where the school, the Mount Arlington Public School went to DC, and they took one of those chartered buses, and they wanted to tip the bus driver. And I think I might have called Val, I don't even remember, but we ended up giving a tip to the bus driver because that's what they always did. So, it was one of those things where they were carrying cash around, which isn't a good practice, especially if you're going all the way to DC and back, but they did bring the cash and they did tip the bus driver. There was no other way I could do it. Sometimes there's no resolution to it. You can't figure it out. So we did do it.
Well, thank you, Robin, because you brought another thing to my mind, and that is paying kids for their meals. And so I would get the question that, they're going on this field trip and each kid gets $10 and whoever the advisor is running around with money. I don't think that should happen. I think there's ways that things could be put on credit cards. I'm not a big proponent of employees putting things on credit cards and being reimbursed, but at least there's a trail there where whoever's in charge can put it on a credit card and get reimbursed much tighter than going on a trip with cash.
And Kathy, Nicole Schoening says that when they do theirs, they include those tips as part of the payment to the vendor. So it's included.
Thank you for that, Nicole.
We do have another question
Okay.
about student fundraising for outside organizations. If we can talk a little bit about that, if we have anything about the philanthropy that the districts would like to participate in, and when they can and can't fundraise for outside organizations.
I believe the New Jersey DOE audit program says that when that's being done, that whoever is raising funds for outside organizations is taking that on as a citizen and not as part of the district. I guess you could have a club that wanted to raise for the American Heart Association, and just based on the guidelines that DOE has put out, which are very vague and very little there, that really should be done outside of student activities. And so my favorite line is, and in every presentation I probably say it, no good deed goes unpunished. So every time we're trying to do good and we're benevolent and we want to give, we have to be careful that we're putting measures in place because it could come back to bite us, and we don't want that. So you just have to use some, draw a line and try to stay to that line. There are certainly exceptions to rules in life, but we have to take our heart and our mind and kind of make a resolve in the middle. And then, of course, your auditors are like your priests. Just come to us. We'll have the confession, we'll absolve, and we'll move forward. But I think the whole thing in life is you have situations and you do the best you can do and you learn from it. And we just try to jump ahead of it.
And we had one more before we continue, a suggestion from another person on how they handled the larger trips What they did was they got American Express gift cards for each of the advisors and gave them those gift cards with a set amount of money on them. And then they turned in all of the receipts and any unused gift cards that they didn't use to purchase those student meals while they were on the longer trip. So kind of kept it a little more streamlined, but there was no cash. So that was a great suggestion.
Okay. What do we go to next? Because I might want to take a little, okay. I'm just going to raise the comment. This comes up in many, many districts where districts are allowing teachers to pay for things on their credit cards and be reimbursed. Could our three presenters comment on that, how prevalent that is in your school district? Cheryl, how much are you reimbursing staff for costs?
We try to get them to go through the regular purchasing process as much as possible. We understand that certain things might occur. In that case, we kind of use, let them use Amazon as an option because we have an educational account. So maybe they can find it that way as opposed to doing on their credit card. But again, we kind of take it as a case by case. We try not to do it, but there will be cases where they might need to.
Okay, now, because I messed up when I did the slides, I obviously copied and pasted and forgot to edit. We were going to talk under cash disbursements about using Amazon because it does come up in student activities and it comes up throughout the business office. So I would like all three of you to talk about Amazon or any other online purchasing that you do. So I'll let Cheryl finish with that because she referred to the account. Could you describe that a little bit?
We have an educational account where we have one person in the business office that will handle all the orders. And then we get invoices from Amazon and then we just pay through a regular purchase order. So that's one way that we can try to get better prices or if try to eliminate teachers or other people using their personal credit cards.
Perfect. And then I don't know how easy or difficult it is to get an educational account on Amazon.
That was set up before I got here, so.
Awesome. Let's see, Robin, do you want to talk about your experience with Amazon, and is there any other websites that are being utilized?
So in Parsippany, we did not use Amazon before I left. In Mount Arlington, when I got here in January, they are using Amazon. They have a business account with them, and we use purchase orders, and it goes through the regular requisition purchase order process to buy things on Amazon. I think it's working well. I had never done it before, so that was a new thing. And the little district was the one that did it. So it is working well. And they also use teachers pay teachers. They have an account with them and they get, and they order stuff through there also, and it's been working well. Now, you don't have to worry about Mount Arlington because it's such a small district. You never hit up against even a quote threshold with these kind of things. So I don't know what would happen if, we got to the quote threshold, whether or not I would have to really look into the regulations for that. But for right now, it's working well.
Okay, Licia?
Sure. Well, Amazon is the last resource. We have our staff look into vendors from EdData, any consortiums, any state contracts, and if they can't find it, then Amazon is the last resource they can use. They need to go through an approval process. We have a support center for the board office where they submit tickets, and this is one of them. And Amazon authorization is required before putting in a requisition in our ALIA system. Once they put in the requisition, it goes through the approvals. And once the PO is created, then the person in charge in the board office will put in the order through Amazon.com.
Okay, so with each of those responses, it sounds to me as though Amazon is being used for general fund purchases and not so much for student activities.
We have several questions on the Amazon follow-up, so.
Sure.
one of the questions was, does Amazon sign purchase orders? And if they are signing, who is the purchase order being made out to? Are there limits? Do we pay taxes on those purchases, and where do we mail payment? So I guess for those who are using Amazon, can you walk through how a transaction occurs for your district in Amazon? There were several questions that flooded in on that one, so maybe we can just walk through a process of an Amazon purchase.
I never had a PO that require a signature, so it's because it's under the threshold, and we try to keep that under the threshold. So we hadn't that issue with that Amazon. The POs are made to Amazon.com.
Okay. Cheryl or Robin?
The purchase orders are made out to Amazon, and just like Morris Hills, Morris Knowles, the purchases aren't more than threshold. So whether they got a voucher back, I don't know. I don't think so, because we didn't have to.
Then we don't pay taxes.
Well, I know Cheryl is the one who said that the account is called an educational account, so I would think right from the start that would be set up as non-taxable. Robin referred to her setup as a business account, but they're all saying.
And no
I
tax.
guess Nicole has chimed in, I guess, for the way Cheryl, because I guess Nicole was the one who would set it up in Wayne. For Amazon, I guess they directly contacted Amazon and explained, and they set it up with POs, and they signed this. I guess you receive signed POs and statements referencing those PO numbers, and that must be how you're signed up as an education account.
Okay, good.
Okay. Any other questions in there, Val? Like I'm seeing one from Katie saying, do you set an annual limit? Did we discuss that? Did I miss
Not if
that?
we set up yeah. There's several of them. Some have gone through a credit approval. So there's somebody over Rita has a centrally approved purchase orders in the business office. Amazon is last resort for other districts. A lot of comments more than questions on, I guess everybody's handling Amazon just a little bit differently. It isn't really a standardized process, it sounds like, in most districts. But I think the one question we haven't answered is there a limit to Amazon purchases? But it sounds like it might be thresholds of purchase orders and or last resort type. But I don't know if there's a set amount.
I think ours is set at 10,000, but we never come close to that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, one other question that I see in here, Val, is from Christine asking what type of account does Robin have with Teachers Pay Teachers?
So that account was set up right sometime when I wasn't in Mount Arlington, so I do not have the answer to that question, but I can definitely find out the answer. So if she wants to email me, I will
Yep.
find out the answer for her.
Yep.
I do not know.
We will make the connections. If people have questions, just email us and the partner who handles your account, and we will get you to the answering person. So we're going to go into the GASB 84 piece of this, and Heidi and Mon are going to take over. And I just want to preface it, as I have throughout the discussion of the whole deposit payment record keeping bank reconciliation process, that we've got 3 people here who have total control over that. And we recognize that that does not occur in every district. The things that we're saying, it was very important for us to put options up here in terms of how each district will receive this information. It's a work in progress. NJDOE has really put little to nothing out, and I will let Heidi, relay the feedback and the feeling of the feedback from DOE as it relates to that. So Heidi, take it away.
So as you know, GASB 84 was delayed due to COVID by GASB. So it's effective for this year. And speaking with the Department of Education, they're not required, though they have set up some accounts, they're not requiring you. So you can, you know, Mon will go over what you're allowed to do. So what's going to happen in the audit report, the H schedules or the fiduciary funds section is going away. So everything for student activity is going to be reported in special revenue funds. So you'll see student activities on your exhibit E1, the schedule of revenue and expenditures, and you'll also see it'll be included in the balances on your B1 governmental funds balance sheet. Any unexpended funds for student activities will be restricted fund balance.
Now, if I can interject, because I always do, is again, when you're looking at your E1 schedule, you see a column for Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, IDEA Basic, IDEA Preschool, and any state grants that you have. My perception, and only my perception, is there is going to be a column that says student activity funds. And it is going to be the gross transactions of all of your schools. So if you're 1 school, 2 schools, 13 schools, 14 schools, it's going to be one column that says student activities. We have gotten no information about that, but that's how I perceive it. But as Heidi goes into the record keeping options, you still need to have that detail within the district. So go ahead, Heidi.
So these are your different options. Keep on doing it the same way that you have. Keep the same record, and then we would make any necessary adjustments for audit presentation. If you want to bring it into your records, you could create a new fund. We're suggesting you might want to use something other than Fund 20, maybe like 21. Or if you already are using your district's financial software and you already have it in Fund 95, you can keep that the same. And then we will just combine that with Fund 20 for presentation and the audit.
Okay, I'm going to clarify before the next polling question. So when we talk about creating a new fund, that would just be that if the business office or the schools, I'm going to say basically when the schools are doing the reconciliations, that information is communicated to the business office. And if you want to go that middle distance, you could post receipts and disbursements in a separate Fund 21 to, you know, have a record of all those student activity funds or not. So some business administrators are very concerned about making sure that their records mirror the audit, or they're willing to accept that there are different pieces that get pulled together for the audit. And certainly in Cheryl, Alicia, Robin's case, where they have everything running through Fund 95, we don't see the need at this point to enter all the Fund 95 information into 20. It's just a matter of when you come to the audit, you combine 20 and 95 from the district's records. And I know Cheryl, being an auditor in her past, was contemplating how she feels about that. And so just want to make that perfectly clear that the options are there. You might want to think about what you want to do. And, you know, none of this is necessary, you know, that you have to go to a high level of record keeping if you don't have the staffing situation. So Katie, can we go to the second polling question?
Yes, so we're going to go ahead and launch the second polling question.
So we gave you about 60 seconds to think to answer this question.
So we'll leave it open for a bit. The question is, how will your district be implementing GASB 84?
Keep the records the same, create a note of the fund.
We'll leave it open for like a minute so everyone can get their answers.
We didn't give them the option of not sure.
I was thinking that. If you don't
That's
know, okay.
They're good people.
All right, I'll leave it open for a couple more seconds. All right. going to go ahead and share with everyone. All right, so everyone should see the results. Most people are keeping them the same as previous years, about half. Then we see 26% recording in the general ledger system and 18% bringing externally maintained records into the board office.
Great. Good. Heidi?
As Kathy had mentioned, I just want to stress this because I've gotten, a lot of questions about setting up payroll agency or unemployment or flex spending or student activities in the accounting records and what account should be set up and et cetera. And I just want to stress the fact that because, and this is obviously just my opinion, the DOE is not requiring you to put everything into your current accounting software, that unless you really absolutely want to, I would recommend not to do it. And that's why we provided the 3 options, right? The least amount of effort, meaning that you just maintain status quo, do whatever you're doing now, or be in the middle ground, meaning setting up a new fund in your accounting software and just entering in monthly total so that you have ending balances. But then obviously that will add work to your business office because now you have to kind of make sure that whatever you're entering on a monthly basis actually reconcile with the external records that are being kept at the school. And then the last option, which is the most, I guess, comprehensive, is that you are putting everything into your accounting system, meaning that you're going to be processing all your purchase orders and everything through it. So depending on your staffing situation, the level of control that you want to have over on all these funds, then you just have to make a decision based on all of that. So for payroll agency and flex spending, it's similar to student activities, that is going to be out of fiduciary, your age schedules. So that it's no longer going to be on the age schedules and it's going to be considered part of Fund 10. So for payroll agency, basically you're going to have cash offset by a liability. I know there's several districts out there that already have payroll agency in their accounting software set up as Fund 90 or 95 or 99, whatever it is. And they have, all the different, federal tax liability, state tax liability, pension, et cetera, all the different agencies set up as a liability through the accounting software. So again, it's kind of the same with the student activities. So we're providing options for you, whether you want to maintain status quo and keep it the way it is, in whether it's in QuickBooks or an Excel file, whatever it is, just maintain the same records and we'll just incorporate it into the financial statement at the end of the year for audit presentation purposes. Or if you want to set up a new fund and post everything through there, that's really your decision to make. But same thing with student activities though, we do still ask for details. For example, on the student activities, we always look to make sure that you have an analysis by, club or activities when we look at your high school account, for example. So the same situation will be for payroll agency. We still, whether you bring it into the business office or not, we're still expecting that you have the detailed by the type of agency in whatever records that you have.
Going back, I can remember seeing gigantic, enormous Excel files, keeping track of all the individual agencies and payroll. It's pretty unwieldy. And then I know that people move to the mid-road, Quicken, QuickBooks, where you can print that out, maybe a 3-4 page report to get the balances of what is owed. I know Robin recently was talking to me about Mount Arlington, and she worries about every little thing. And so she said, you know, 5 years ago when I was here, we had this balance in payroll agency, and it hasn't changed, that there's money in there that doesn't belong in there. And so it's just a good measure for you to be able to take a look at it and say, okay, it is not a perfect world. Payroll agency does not come out exact. Things happen, adjustments get made, checks get voided and reissued, and we're not even talking about a lot of money. Talking about, you know, $5,000 or less or something like that. But it would be a good practice to, you know, annually go through that and say, okay, we need to move some of this money back to the general fund just to get it more on point with what is really owed.
I have a question that probably be best directed to Heidi, as I know she's kind of done this research. There is student activities now recorded in the revenue and section of the DOE budget software under Fund 20. Does this mean that the school districts are now required to keep and track all revenue and expenses of student activities in Fund 20?
As we were saying, it's really up to you what you want to do.
Right.
It's not going to be reported in odd sum. I verified that with DOE. So what do you feel the most comfortable doing? If things are working the way you currently have it in a separate fund, whether it's Excel or QuickInk, QuickBooks, whether it's Fund 95, you don't have to use DOE's account numbering system. Up to you.
I think they implemented that for the 21-22 budget because they were showing that they were gearing up for GASB 84. And so it is kind of funny. Got a few phone calls. Pretty much BAs did what they thought was best. They either put 0. I had one BA who said, I put $100 in as a budget. And then other ones would call and I'd say, okay, look at last year's whatever, 3 or 4 schedule, how much money ran through student activities. Maybe it was $500,000. And then I said, well, wait a minute, last year was COVID-19. Maybe you want to go to the fiscal year ending 19, that would be a better measure. Because, you know, didn't know at that point, if you put $100 in there, does the board have to go through any mechanism to be spending more than that? You know, the point is you put something in, it'll be reported in the E1 schedule for student activity funds. And so going into your next year's budget, you'll again have an idea of what that number is, but how it ever, you know, matches up budget to actual. Not too sure about that.
Yeah, just a word of caution to, I guess, the districts out there who are considering setting up payroll agency in their accounting software. I would recommend not doing it in Fund 10 just because it is going to be considered Fund 10. Not to do it in Fund 10, your accounting software, because I think it's just going to complicate things a little too much, and it's going to make your reconciliation process at the end of the year so much harder.
But whatever option you decide to do, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help you with that.
I guess a comment should be made because Heidi and Mon were having a discussion about unemployment funds. So obviously, board contributions could be going into the unemployment fund, employee contributions are going into the employment fund, and there's a tiny bit of interest being earned on the unemployment funds. But the question that it plays, like agency is not a problem because it's just cash in and offsetting liability. But in the case of unemployment funds, it becomes restricted fund balance and possibly a liability as well. And, you know, the question came in, I don't believe, I mean, the unemployment funds could be significant in a district such as Wayne, but by and large, you know, it's a balance that sits there and it's not a big change. I don't know if there's a bigger change as a result of COVID and other people being unemployed, but I don't think that happened in schools. Is that fund balance, the question that came in was, it's going to be restricted, so it'll be outside of the threshold for excess, but it also processes a charge to the C1. So in your records, you may have had a board contribution of $25,000 to unemployment, but because we have to adjust for the beginning and ending balances of the full unemployment account, it could have some, hopefully, marginal effect on the expenditures and the resulting fund balance. So that was a little bit of a concern, not an overly big concern.
That's kind of our one open question, and I haven't gotten an answer from DOE on that. So with respect to, maybe we can go to the next slide and talk about unemployment and the
I'm sorry,
scholarship.
I thought we were at the end.
So once again, just like the other funds that we talked about, which were formerly fiduciary funds with GASB 84, unemployment and scholarship funds are going to be part of the governmental funds. So once again, you can elect to keep things the way that you have, manual, Excel, Quicken, QuickBooks, or include as part of your financial software in those funds. So for our scholarship funds, I'll go with that one first. That's Fund 20. So we have a suggestion. You might want to put it in, if you want to include it and create a new fund and put it as part of special revenue fund, maybe create a separate fund, Fund 22 or 23 or something different for scholarships. So any funds left over at the end of the year would be restricted fund balance. Then with unemployment, unemployment is the most unusual or different one out of all these. So that's going to be part of the general fund. And what's going to happen is the employee contributions will go to the other liability account, and then any expenses during the year will be net against that first. And then if there's some additional claims or payments that need to be made and there's not enough money with the employee contributions to cover that, then it will be against the district share. We don't have to go back and take a look at the beginning balance. Everything as of 7/1/20 will be considered restricted fund balance, whether it be, came from employee or employer share interest. And like I said, we don't know. I wasn't able to get an answer out of DOE as to how they want us to present that and handle that on the C1, but definitely we will be working towards getting resolution by audit time.
So I lost track of my slides, Heidi. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to preempt you. I thought we were at the end and I said, oh my goodness, we didn't talk about those unemployment funds. Anybody have any questions? Any of our panelists think of anything through the conversation that they would like to add? Wow, hearing none. Well, I hope that the conversation was helpful, got your mind a little open to what we're talking about here. And I think if you've worked with Nisivoccia for a while, you know that we really try to minimize the pain to you and still meet the requirements of the new guidelines. And so we like this roundtable setting because it's a little bit smaller, a little more personal than going to a statewide type program. So we like this to be a forum where you can feel comfortable saying what you need to say, and we'll try to get some answers for you. So with that, we have been looking for topics for our next roundtable, and we selected the date of Friday, April 30th. And so our last polling question is to ask you what topics are important to you, how can we better help and prepare you for the world that you're living in and your audit and everything that goes with it. So with that, here are some topics that some people did send out to us. And we would certainly welcome, any day that you're thinking about something, just shoot one of us an email saying, hey, I think this would be a great topic.
All right, so everyone can vote on some options here. We're also gonna have a survey that will come up when this ends, and you can leave any topics that come to mind that you don't see here on there. We'll also send out an email to all of you with the slides, and in that we can include contact information. I know some people had some questions for some of our panelists, so we'll make sure we get all that to you. We'll also upload a recording of this on our website, so if you want to rewatch it, you can do that as well. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
And Katie, we will be sending out the slides.
Yes, yep, we'll send that in the follow-up email as well, right?
Okay, perfect. Along, and in that follow-up email, can we just make a note to keep track of the vendors?
Yes,
for
yeah.
the app, so that we can get that information into that same piece
Yep.
of information.
Yep, we'll make sure we have everything so that when we email you guys, you have all that material. All right, great. So if everyone, these are our results. Glad you guys are interested in some of these topics.
I guess we were on the right track.
Yeah.
So
Great.
again, there are programs out there. I know that there's one coming up through New Jersey ASBO on the federal funds, and Heidi and Mon and I will be participating in that. So ours is after that, so we can take some of that information and kind of mold it for all of you to get you best prepared for that. So we greatly appreciate your input. We are here for you. And we look forward to seeing you again on April 30th. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Everyone have a great day.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
You too. Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye.